Welcome to Trash Talk MMA, the #1 podcast for news and insight that matters in the world of mixed martial arts. Brought to you live and unfiltered from all four corners of the globe by MMA aficionado, Antoine Peltier.
Yo, welcome to Trash Talk MMA. I'm your host, Antoine Peltier, and we are officially live in Chalong, Phuket, Thailand. It is Friday, February 13th, 2015. That's normally an unlucky day, but we're in luck because today we get to watch Bellator 133, and one of my favorite fighters of all time, Melvin Manhoef, will be competing on that card, as well as another one of my favorite Bellator fighters, Pat Curran. So let's take a look at the card that's coming up tonight on Friday and see what's going on. So since Bellator was taken over by Scott Coker, their cards have been really, really good from top to bottom. Not necessarily in terms of meaningful fights, but in terms of entertainment value, every single one of them has been exceptional. So if you haven't been watching Bellator, you know, they've thinned out their events. Well, actually, they're making better events and making fewer of them since Scott Coker took over. But make sure you check them out. There's just been an incredible amount of stoppages and violent finishes and just overall entertaining fights. So Coker, in my opinion, is a great replacement for Bjorn Rebney and is doing a great job. And with the backing of Viacom, I think that Bellator is gonna have a really nice 2015. They're gonna make a lot of noise. Now for Bellator 133 in particular, I really want to focus on the co-main event and the main event. So the co-main event is a featherweight bout between Pat Curran and Daniel Weichel. If you don't know Pat Curran, he's the cousin, I believe, of former UFC fighter Jeff Curran, and he's also the former two-time Bellator featherweight champion, and he also won 2 of the Bellator tournaments, namely at lightweight and at featherweight. If you can try to find a highlight reel from him, he's got some very impressive stoppages. The first one I remember was an incredible knockout of former UFC fighter Mike Ricci in Bellator, where he absolutely starched him with one punch. He also holds an impressive decision win over Roger Huerta in what I believe is a bit of a controversial decision, but a win nonetheless. He also holds one of those rare Peruvian necktie submission wins over Luis Palomino in Bellator. And one of my favorite stoppages by Pat Curran was his head kick knockout over Marlon Sandro. If you don't know Marlon Sandro, that's another guy to also check out. He was an absolute killer in what is now the defunct Sengoku promotion in Japan. If you never watched any Sengoku cards, there was a lot of really, really cool fights on there. A lot of good guys, a lot of good names, and one of the guys they brought over was featherweight champion Marlon Sandro, who over in Sengoku was just absolutely blasting guys. I think at one point he left 3 guys consecutively in a row on a stretcher from 1 or 2 punch knockouts. So to see him get completely flatlined by Pat Curran was absolutely impressive, and one of Curran's best performances ever. But absolutely, what I would consider his most impressive performance ever was his stunning KO victory, where he won the featherweight strap over former champion Joe Warren. If you haven't seen that fight, try to find that as well. It's really one of the most hard to watch stoppages in the history of the sport, in my opinion. Joe Warren gets battered from pillar to post, absolutely torn to pieces by Curran. And it's a fight that should have been stopped way before it was. But in terms of entertainment value, absolutely incredible. And in terms of a highlight reel for Curran, definitely the highlight of his career. He also has 2 wins over uber tough Daniel Strauss, who's also a former champion himself in Bellator. And Curran lost his belt to Strauss, who then in turn lost his belt recently to Pitbull. But he's got 2 stoppage wins over Daniel Strauss, which no one else can claim to have. So very impressive. So as I said, Curran lost the belt to Patricio Pitbull Freire in a tough decision loss, and he's been alternating wins and losses in his last 4 bouts, but is actually 7-2 since dropping a featherweight. His opponent Daniel Weichel is a German fighter. He's actually had a ton of fights. I'm not quite familiar with Weichel. I'm sure I've watched some of his fights inadvertently, but I wouldn't recognize him on the street. But he has 42 fights, which is insane. He's has a record of 34-8 with 21 submissions. He's fought a lot of big names, actually. Unfortunately, he's lost to the majority of them. He's fought and lost to Dan Hardy, to Paul Daly, to Thiago Tavares, but he does hold a win over Dennis Seaver, who recently fought against the notorious Conor McGregor. So in Bellator, he's won 3 straight fights with 2 stoppages, and that allowed him to win the Bellator Season 10 featherweight tournament. So normally under the old Bellator regime, he would have been fighting for the belt. He's not fighting for the belt in this case, although I'm assuming that if he does get a victory over Pat Curran, the former champ, that he would of course get the title shot. So I'm not sure why Bellator decided to break the pattern of giving title shots to the tournament winners, but I'm going to assume that it's because they're no longer following the tournament format, and pretty much any of the old protocols that were in place have been revised. Anyway, I think it's good. I think it's good that he fights Curran. If he can beat Curran, then absolutely give the guy a title shot. Unfortunately, the problem for Weichel is that when Pat Curran is coming off a loss, he's always frighteningly effective. He's never lost 2 fights in a row, and I don't believe it's going to happen now. My prediction would be that Pat Curran will win this fight by stoppage in either the first or the second round. In any case, tune in for this fight. If you're not familiar with Pat Curran, get familiar with him. I believe he's one of the best and most underrated featherweights in the business, and he's actually a fighter who I'd love to see in the UFC because of his versatility, his durability, and his ability to learn from his losses and always come back a better fighter. Moving on to the main event, this is where the real fun's going to begin, as we have a middleweight contest between the infamous Melvin Manhoef and Alexander Shlemenko. Not really sure. People pronounce Manhoef's names different ways. I call him Manhoef. Some people call him Manhoef. I'm sure the Dutch would say Manhoef, but I'm sticking with Manhoef. So, if you don't know Melvin Manhoef, you have to check out his highlight reel on YouTube. I posted a nice one on my blog today. You can go see that at trashtalkmma.com. If not, just go to YouTube, put in Melvin Manhoef's name, put in highlight reel, and check out 3 or 4 of the videos that pop up there, and you'll see that this guy's an absolute beast. He comes out with a ferocity and an intensity that very few fighters have. I can't really even think of anyone else ever in the sport that brings to the table the sort of dynamics and intensity that Melvin Manhoef brings. So truly a unique fighter, a true journeyman. He's fought in every single significant MMA promotion except for the UFC. He's fought in Bellator, he's fought in ONE FC, he's fought in Dream, Strikeforce. He's been on tons of the Dynamite events in Japan, fought in Heroes, Cage Rage, M1, It's Showtime. The list goes on. The guy's a legend and an absolute icon. Some of the fights that are a must-see by Manhoef, in my opinion. The first off would be his incredible slugfest versus Evangelista Cyborg Santos in Cage Rage. If you haven't seen that fight, talk to it about anybody who knows MMA. They've all seen it, and it's just an absolute barn burner between 2 cavemen that just go at it like super goons. Make sure you try to find that fight. It's just brutal. It's surprising somebody didn't die in it. What's crazy too is he's fought at several weight classes. He mainly competes at middleweight, but he's had some light heavyweight fights, and he even took a heavyweight fight in Dream versus Mark Hunt and was the first person to knock out Mark Hunt, and he did it in 18 seconds and left Mark Hunt out cold. So, that's an unbelievable accomplishment that a middleweight fighter was able to starch Mark Hunt, be the first person to do it, and to do it in 18 seconds flat. That being said, that was kind of during the period where it was considered that Mark Hunt was in a slump, and he certainly was, and that's probably a fight that Hunt would like to forget. But in any case, it happened, and it's a really cool highlight reel if you check out that fight too. So Manhoef he just comes in there scary with a kill or be killed attitude, and of late he recently got killed pretty bad. He is in his last fight at Bellator 133. He took on legendary kickboxer Joe Schilling, and the fight went really back and forth with both guys getting hurt, both guys getting rocked, and unfortunately the fight ended badly for Manhoef. He got knocked out with a brutal punch and was completely laid out. It's a fight that could have gone either way. But it certainly didn't go Manhoef's way. And after the fight, in his fight before that, he managed to get a one-punch knockout over Doug Marshall at Bellator 125. And recently he also had a second knockout victory over Evangelista Cyborg Santos, so definitely cementing that he's got Cyborg's number. So Melvin Manhoef's MMA record is 29-12 with 27 knockouts, so it's never any mystery of what he's going to do. He likes to get in the cage of the ring, rush his opponent, throw bombs, throw flurries, and try to decimate him as quickly and violently as possible. So, I mean, tonight he's not going to do anything different. He recently posted an interesting article, an interesting quote where he's clearly conscious of how he's sacrificing his body and his health for the sport of MMA. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. The guy, that's absolutely what he does. He either gets a knockout or gets knocked out, and you just have to watch his fights because of the intensity he brings. It's just too much fun. You can't miss it. So his opponent, Alexander Shlemenko, is the former Bellator middleweight champion, where he defended his belt twice, and he also won 2 Bellator middleweight tournaments. Shlemenko is known for his unorthodox striking style, which is difficult to refer to as traditional Muay Thai or kickboxing. He's also known for his knee strikes. He also often uses techniques, a lot of spinning techniques, like spinning back kick or the spinning back fist. And he stated in many interviews that he prefers to fight standing up rather than on the ground, and always trying to knock his opponent out. Shlemenko's coming off a decision. He fought in Russia on December 20th, but before that he lost his last 2 Bellator fights, actually. So he lost his middleweight belt to the unheralded Brandon Halsey in a stunning 35-second upset, and he also got submitted in a light heavyweight matchup that he took against Tito Ortiz when Tito had his Bellator debut. So, I mean, he really got overpowered by Tito's size and strength in that fight and succumbed to an arm triangle choke in 2.5 minutes into the first round. So, obviously Shlemenko, he's looking to regain his middleweight title. He has 29 wins by KO, 8 by submission. Seeing that he has more tools than Manhoef and obviously a much better gas tank, if he can survive the initial onslaught, every minute that goes by will be in Shlemenko's favor. So Shlemenko as well is an incredible journeyman, and he has a staggering 51-9 record in MMA with 29 KOs and 8 submissions, like I previously said. It's interesting when you see fighters that have this many fights on their records, and you begin to wonder where how much wear and tear is occurring, and how much is experience still playing a part in them having an advantage over their opponents. But anyway, both of these guys have been around the block. They both know what the fans want to see. And it's cool to see Bellator actually using Melvin the right way. Putting him in there with guys that like to stand and bang, the Doug Marshalls and the Joe Schillings and the Alexander Shlemenkos. He's putting asses in seats, and he's not going to win any belts, and he's not going to keep any brain cells, but they're using him for good promotional purposes, and that's the way Melvin would want it. So it's good to see that Bellator is slotting him against the correct opponents that fans want to see. Unfortunately, I think he's going to lose this. I think Shlemenko is going to learn from his last 2 losses. I think he's going to be really hungry to get a win. He wants to get his belt back. I think he's going to weather the storm. He's going to be patient, and he's going to find an opening that will allow him to either knock out or get Melvin to the ground and submit him, maybe in the second or third round. So my take would be Shlemenko I'd say probably Shlemenko by submission in the second or third round. But I'll be rooting for Melvin, of course. Now, on an interesting side note, I noticed that Sean Salmon was on the list of victims while perusing Shlemenko's Wikipedia record in MMA. So if anybody remembers or doesn't remember Sean Salmon, anytime you see Rashad Evans fight, there's a highlight reel of him head kick KOing a guy, and that guy would be Sean Salmon. This Rashad, he made his debut in January of 2007 against Rashad Evans, and got ruthlessly head kicked into oblivion, and at the time had a record of 9-2. After that loss, he had some wins, had some losses, and his last win had him at 18-9 in May of 2010. So that's when he won his last fight. Interestingly, I didn't realize this because I totally lost track of his career. He then went on to have 12 straight first-round stoppage losses. So, with all the controversies and whatnot that go on a daily and weekly basis in the sport of MMA between bad reffing, bad judging, weird matchups, guys doping up or getting busted for coke and weed. It's interesting to see that, there's also some very bizarre commission work, like athletic commission work, that are allowing a guy to take on 12 straight fights where he's getting blasted and stopped every single time in the first round. During that run of losses, the only names that I could recognize on the list were Tom DeBlas and Jeremy Horn, which aren't exactly standouts anymore, but truly, Jeremy Horn is obviously a legend. So what's funny is, reading further up on Salmon's Wikipedia page, he then claimed to be getting a fight in 2014 with Bellator. And that, again, just seemed completely absurd. I don't understand how he could have possibly received a fight in Bellator with a record of 18-21 and coming off of, 12 straight first-round stoppage losses. He then claims to have retired officially, which is probably the best for him and his family. So, good luck to Sean Salmon, and nice try. You made a lot of other guys look really, really good. So there you have it. There's my preview for the co-main and the main event of Bellator 133 that's happening today, Friday the 13th on Spike TV. I'm going to actually consider this my first official podcast. I have 4 other ones up on my website and up on iTunes. Both the website, trashtalkmma.com, and my iTunes podcast feed are now live and available for you to subscribe to. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to consider this the first real podcast because it's the first one that I'm going to be able to post before the event actually takes place. So I hope you enjoy this one. I'll be bringing another one very shortly for UFC Fight Night 60 that's taking place tomorrow. But in the meantime, check out the website. Hit me up on Twitter at TrashTalkMMA. Hit me up on Facebook. Give me your feedback. Subscribe to the podcast. Give it a 5-star rating. I'd love it if you did that. It would really help me out. And I'll be back really, really soon with my next podcast for UFC Fight Night 60 tomorrow. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Trash Talk MMA podcast. Be sure to visit trashtalkmma.com. And don't forget to follow Antoine on Twitter at TrashTalkMMA. Let us know you're listening. Use hashtag TrashTalkMMA.
Welcome to Trash Talk MMA. I'm your host, Antoine Pelletier, and we are officially live in Chalong, Phuket, Thailand. It is Friday, February 13th, 2015. That's normally an unlucky day, but we're in luck because today we get to watch Bellator 133, and one of my favorite fighters of all time, Melvin Manhoef, will be competing on that card, as well as another one of my favorite Bellator fighters, Pat Curran. So let's take a look at the card that's coming up tonight on Friday and see what's going on. So since Bellator was taken over by Scott Coker, their cards have been really, really good from top to bottom. Not necessarily in terms of meaningful fights, but in terms is a great replacement for Bjorn Rebney, and is doing a great job. And with the backing of Viacom, I think that Bellator is gonna have a really nice 2015. They're gonna make a lot of noise. Now for Bellator 133 in particular, I really want to focus on the co-main event and the main event. So the co-main event is a featherweight bout between Pat Curran and Daniel of entertainment value. Every single one of them has been exceptional. So if you haven't been watching Bellator, they've thinned out their events. Well, actually, they're making better events and making fewer of them since Scott Coker took over. But make sure you check them out. There's just been an incredible amount of stoppages and violent finishes and just overall entertaining fights. So Coker, in my opinion, is a...
Welcome to Trash Talk MMA, the #1 podcast for news and insight that matters in the world of mixed martial arts. Brought to you live and unfiltered from all 4 corners of the globe by MMA aficionado, Antoine Pelletier.
Yo!